Okay. Okay, board members, please come to the table. Please come to the table. I'm going to allot a very short period of time because we then need to finish so people can get home. The prediction is that the storm will likely get here by 6:30 and people have to get off the road. So, okay, board members, please return to the table. Board members, please return to the table. This is going to be very brief for your own safety.
Superintendent? Yeah. Dr.
You can
Burbank?
declare a snow day.
I'm about ready to do that.
Yes, we're going to declare a storm day. Okay. All right. All right. The first piece of business, if we are not able to finish this tonight, is the agreement that the current policy remains in force if we have to adjourn before we get to a sense of consensus tonight. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. The weather is predicted, they've been watching it, to be here at 6:30. People need to be able to be home and somewhere by 6:30. It's going to be intense. Yes, I know that. A lot of people do. Okay, we're going to begin with a very brief discussion, and Ms. Dernak-Koufax indicated that what is proposed is what was the consensus of the committee. Yes, we have a quorum now. So, Mr. Plattenberg, if you could do a very brief presentation, then we'll just kind of take the temperature and see where we are. But at 10 to 6, we are adjourning.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and the rest of the school board members. We've gone through a pretty exhaustive process of revising the wireless telephone policy, the monopole policy, and in that process, we had a number of different meetings through governance where we came back and forth about the update to the policy. And we had community members who were a part of that. They brought us a lot of information that they felt we needed to consider. There were some of the key elements that we took a look at was it aligned with the purpose and intent, the desire of the school board? 2, is it safe? And then there were some other ancillary things about desires of having change in terms of setbacks and things like that. We believe that through this process, in fact, at governance on a couple of occasions, we got to a point where we as staff, we didn't feel that we incorporated all the desires of the folks, the school board elected officials that are part of the governance. So we kept bringing the item back. In addition to that, we kept eliciting input from community groups. There was an individual activist group and some others that were concerned about, and still are, about our cell tower policy. So we felt like at the beginning they brought up the constituency groups brought up about 14 different items. And we worked through those, and most of those items had to do with preserving land for school, no elementary school specifically, any community opposition, the application shouldn't move forward. No easements for adjoining properties, which we were the staff was in conflict with. A third-party evaluator, CMS, for municipal solutions. And in fact, some of the items we incorporated in this language, and about the school board retaining final authority on all applications, elementary schools taken off the list and only considered by a school board member request, and community input involvement from initial site evaluation visit. So we've increased or amped up the amount of community input. So we felt like we took a number of those into account. The safety and health concerns, we reviewed everything that was provided out there, but we really did not feel like there was any change in what had been determined previously about the safe and health concerns. There were a lot of good documents that were provided to us that were in connection that included the actual handhelds and having them close to cell phones close to your head and things like that. Some really good information that was provided. But with that, because there was a lot, I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion. I'll just wrap it up there that we feel that we've incorporated what the purpose and intent of the school board was, and we think this is a pretty good framework for it, which the staff can move forward in the future.
And could you summarize how this policy is different in terms of school board activity as opposed to the previous?
Yeah, previously, the school board member activity was really removed, and now it's pretty much inclusively involved in terms of making sure that the school board member is not only aware, the community surrounding is much more apprised than what had been done previously, and then also having the ability for the school board member to go ahead and say that they do or do not want it. So, I mean, it really does put you back. There was a time when the policy existed that had some of those tenets. And there were some situations and experiences that some of the members of this governing body experienced, and then staff removed that role, and now that role is kind of enveloped back in.
And just so that I understand, so that we all understand, because I was here before, after, and now before again, the school board, the magisterial school board member, and the at-large members could request that an application come for a vote for the entire board, but it is not required.
Correct.
An application can come, and if there is, as long as the board member is involved with the committee, et cetera, that there seems to be no huge difficulty, it still can go to the planning commission, but it could come before the board if there is a lot of questions.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. And again, the issue of safety issues, that has been resolved at the federal and the state level.
And certainly we're not medical professionals, so we defer to those. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And this particular policy, does it preclude consideration on elementary and middle school or not? Or does that?
The preference is really so that it does not allow for elementary school siting. However, that said, there is an exception basis that if a school board member has what they feel is a valid reason or a purpose and intent that they feel should be brought forward, you're certainly entitled to bring one forward to staff. Okay,
so the intent is that it more commonly be seen on a high school. An application might be considered on a high school property, and only by exception at an elementary school or middle school. So is that the intent? Okay, so that's where we are, correct? Okay, we have about 5 minutes. Before we're going to have to go because of the weather. You missed that. We have a huge weather issue coming. I think, Ms.
I'm confused. Just a procedural question.
Right.
So this is a school board policy. The governance committee worked on this for months. Mr. Wilson and I serve on the governance committee. Unfortunately, Ms. Koufax and Ms. Evans aren't here. And yet we have staff speaking to this draft policy. And now our colleagues who are going to speak on it haven't even heard from the governance committee at all.
Okay, part of our issue, and we may not be able to resolve this tonight, we are going to have to leave here at 10 of 6 because of the impending storm, because we need to get going. That's our issue. So we may not be able to resolve
That's
this
okay.
tonight.
I actually told Ms. Koufax, since she and Sandy couldn't be here, we shouldn't do this without them because this took a lot of work.
Well, if I could,
So-
I'm sorry, Mr. McLaughlin, if I could just break in for a second.
Yes,
This
please.
is something that Ms. Strauss brought up before all board members were in here. And great job, but I do think there are a few changes, but they're substantive. And I think it's going to be really hard for us to give this a good look in the next 5 minutes. So what I'd like, though, for us to resolve right now, if we possibly could, is clarity about what staff and our business partners are supposed to do in the meantime. Governance has been looking at this for 18 months. It's basically been on the shelf for 18 months. And my understanding is that staff is reluctant to move forward on anything as long as we are kind of talking about a new policy. But our existing policy is still our existing policy. So I assume the default is that we use our existing policy until we actually change it. And that is the direction I think we should give staff explicitly right now, unless we have another desire. Is that I mean, I think we need to be clear with staff, Mr. Plattenberg, or are you going ahead under the assumption that the current policy is the rule?
Certainly. I mean, I serve with the pleasure. I've had requests to go ahead and not bring anything forward and while we were working on something before. We've had experiences where in another situation that created confusion on the item, wasn't monopoles. So I've had individual members say, hey, look, if you're going to bring anything forward, let's go ahead and bring it under the new auspices, even though they haven't adopted yet. And then I've also had messaging similar to what you just said, is like, look, if we don't have it approved yet, we should be operating the other.
Thank you.
So I'm
Thank you. So
looking for a little
if you've
direction
had
on that.
individual board members say, don't do anything until we have a new policy, then that, I guess, is why we need to talk about it as a board, because an individual board member cannot put the kibosh on a policy all by him or herself, right? And until we actually change a policy, we live with the policy that we have. And I'd like the board right now to get a sense of the board that that is our direction to staff.
I am going, because we have 5 more minutes, we truly do have to leave so that people get home safely. I'm going to poll the board, and you can vote it down. For the members present, will we operate under the current policy, knowing that there are some applications that are troublesome in some communities? We got that.
Madam Chair, I think we do need to even discuss that, right? I mean, Ms. Hines is right. I think that
Yes.
she presented it, but I
Yes.
think that rather than vote before
And that's fine.
we've
And people
discussed
may
it,
vote it down.
we should definitely discuss it, right?
Okay.
Because I think that
More
Okay.
importantly, to my knowledge, as someone who sat on governance committee, no one instructed, certainly not from the governance committee, the 4 of us never said to Mr. Plattenberg, you got to sit on any applications until we figure this out. That was never communicated by the 4 of us on governance at all. What
Okay.
we were asked was, were there any pending applications? And Mr. Plattenberg said, no, there were not. And so it wasn't creating a problem while we worked through this. But there was no one, and I think Ms. Hines has brought up a very serious issue, and now we're wanting clarity on it. But I think I'd like to know who, Mr. Plattenberg, of any school board members, told you that we weren't going to honor our existing policy until we ironed this one out, because that's a pretty dangerous thing to be saying in a work session, that any one of the 12 of us was directing staff that you can't proceed on an application. That, to my knowledge, has not happened. If it has, then this board should know about it.
Well, I can say, Ms. McLaughlin, no one's directed me with that language. It's been conversational, just like the comments that were made at the beginning by the governance committee that we probably shouldn't bring anything forward, and a couple members of the governance committee said we shouldn't bring anything forward until we straighten this out that would embarrass the school board. So there were comments like that weren't directions or directional, but from a staff perspective, it just makes it a little kludgy for me while we're working on a new policy that does have some substantive changes. And since that time, I've been approached by about one old existing monopole at a high school, and I believe another one was in Herndon High School was the other one. So, that they are coming now since that time at 2 high schools, and in the meantime, I'll be happy to do whatever, really.
Well, just for clarity, Dr. Brabrand and school board members, we were told that there weren't any pending applications, and we certainly never told staff they couldn't do anything until then.
Okay, all right, yes.
I just because I think, like Ms. McLaughlin, I've been sort of wading through cell tower discussions for the better part of a year and a half. It's my understanding that in addition to there not being any applications, there's really only one party that we're talking about that has been living under the existing policy. So I think that it does make sense to finish this work here and then let that person move forward. I don't know that, I guess because we've worked on it so long, I guess by implication, I'm thinking that, well, let's go ahead and use the old policy, and get something done in the next 6 weeks or something when we have the policy and we're discussing it. Hopefully we're close to finishing making changes.
Okay, with the impending weather, I think we can't finish this tonight. So, yeah, and I'm sorry, but I think for everybody's safety, we need to get people home safely. And I think maybe I'm not even going to call for a vote. My sense is people are not comfortable. We will, at chairman's tomorrow, we will decide that we can bring this back quickly. We have some other budget holes that we may be able to bring this up in the next week.
So I'm sorry, Ms. Strauss. What does Superintendent Brabrand take away from this meeting in terms of how to deal with pending applications? Just knowing that this board will take a while to get through this policy. You know what we do. So I don't know, Dr. Braben, is it your understanding that the existing policy is the existing
It
policy?
is my
and that's what
understanding
we use?
existing policy remains and would be processed as such until the board was
Thank
to
you.
pass a new
Thank you.
wireless
I think that would be the
telecommunications
legal
policy.
statement.
Thank you.
Okay, we will reschedule this. I'm so sorry, but I fear the storm seems to be coming. So we are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.